few weeks ago, I was asked to talk a little bit about the basics about dog sledding, basically, or essentially. So I thought it would be a nice idea to just talk a little bit about it while you're watching my dogs run. That's actually the last run that I did. It's about a week ago. Now the weather totally shifted, so it's summertime, or this is still spring for me, being able to run the dogs. And so summertime pretty much starts when the snow really starts melting down. So that's about it, basically. I actually have 9 dogs. They're all Alaskan Malamutes. By the way, they're all family. I did a whole family introduction quite a while ago, so if you're interested in it, just check that video out. But regardless of that, I only took 6 dogs this time. It has several reasons. One of my guys had a little bit of a limp, so I didn't want to take him on in this case, it was a 32-kilometer run. It wasn't worth it really. He is fine though, he just, I don't know, he must have had a little bit of a muscle soreness or what have you, so I just left him home. The other 2 guys are missing and that was, in this case, it was Ignik. Nibitoruk and Galina. Nibitoruk is my old dude. He's 9 years old, or turning to 9 years old pretty soon. And basically the grandfather of most of the dogs there. And Galina stayed home as well because Galina is in high heat, or she was at that time. Now she's a little bit over it. And Nippy is supposed to be the father of her puppies. We will see if something turns out. I haven't seen them mating, but we will see what happens. Anyway, so I have 6 dogs with me. However, I have an 8-dog line in this case. Usually, when I'm running 9 dogs, it's a 10-dog line. So it means like you always have a pair of 2 usually. And if you have an odd number, obviously that dog runs alone. And then it's good to just shift it around, Sometimes it's good to have the last dog and, closer to the sled, running alone, because then he or she can jump from one side to another. Or if you have a dog that is really annoying and jumps over the line all the time, it's sometimes good to just have that dogs separately. But in this case, I took an 8-dog line because I actually was thinking of taking 7 dogs or 8 dogs with me, but in the end, I decided not to. Here you can see a little bit the area where I'm going at. In that direction where you just saw, that's pretty much where we just came from. That's where I'm living, and we're going towards the lake. The run goes fairly smooth, actually. It's still nice conditions, but it's in the morning. I see here I'm helping. I would talk a little bit about it later, but in the end, as a dog sled runner or musher, or however you want to say it, you're not just standing on a sled, you also help them, not going up, going down, you try to have them all running in a relatively smooth rhythm. In this case, since it's Malamutes, they're not running super fast, so my dogs are around 10.5 to 11 kilometers per hour. That's their kind of moving speed. They can run faster, but I don't really want to. So 11.5 is kind of like where I want the maximum to be at, depending a little bit on the snow conditions. Now it's quite easy going in terms of also snow surface. So 11.5 is a pretty good run, actually, in terms of fastness, so you want to keep that. So that means also when you're going uphill, you actually help them by pedaling with them, or if you have a snow pole, a ski pole or something like that, I also pole with them. Excuse me. So but when you're going downhill, you want to level the speed down a little bit, so you're braking. Or if they exceed the 11.5 kilometers per hour moving speed, then you also just use what you call a drag mat, to slow the pace down a little bit. But going back to the dog team itself, so the last dogs that are closer to the dog sled, those are called wheel dogs. It's good to have two because they are the ones that actually getting quote unquote yanked around the most, and they help steering the sled a little bit more because they actually have to pull the power a little bit more, you know. You can see that Galina on the left side there, Tika, sorry, on the left side, she's not pulling that much because she's actually 11 years old. So she's not pulling that much anymore. I have her in the back because she was a little annoying lately, like getting a little bit dominant. Probably seeing that she's getting older, so she starts to pick fights quite easily. Usually she's not that type, but I think she realized that she's getting older, so she takes a bit advantage of like difficult situations or what have you, you know. So I have her in the back to don't have that problem basically. You can see on her that she's actually wearing what you call a bootie or a sock or however you want to say it, because she had a slight little one of the paw pads had a little rip on it. I noticed it when we were running. There was a little bit of blood. It's not a problem. So in order to protect the foot a little bit, you put a bootie on, and that's perfectly fine. You know, those little thingies are not really problematic. It's the same for us, you know, when you have a cut on your finger or whatever, you know. Of course, it's a little different when it's something that you run on, but the dogs are usually perfectly fine. So her performance is not like dwindled due to that, you know. So nothing really to worry about. You can see now like they have to pull a little bit heavier. The whole run looks like fairly slow actually because of the camera. It's just my phone, but that makes it look a little bit slower than it actually is. So you can see on the camera movement that I'm actually helping uphill. Two different types of harnesses you can see as well. Tika to the left there, she's running in a what we call X-Spec harness. For smaller dogs, that's perfectly fine to use that because the thing is, on the pulling point there, like you know where her tail starts, that's where you pull the line basically. You have a little bit of a downward angle, so you have a bit pressure on the hip. You know the main pulling power comes from the chest part, but the pulling, you know, like the line basically gets yanked down slightly, you know, since it's a downward angle. On small dogs like her, it's not that big of a deal, and since she's not pulling that much, it's not that big of an impact. And the further up the line the dogs are, closer to what we call lead dogs, you know, there it's not that big of a deal. But when it comes to actually being in the back, it's better to have a quote unquote a freighting harness. Since we're going through the dogs now, I will tell you who is who. So, front dogs or the lead dogs. On the left side now you see that's Anjarok, and on the right side that's Akpik. Both are quite young. They're 2.5 years old. So pretty youngsters, but they're doing really good in lead. They're getting better and better. Next one there, that goofy little idiot there is Nag. Then you have Kinyak. And Tutu there on the left side, and then Tick on the other side. And that's my dog sled. You can see there is a little bit of heavy weight on there that I just used some wood to put a little bit of weight on it. So the freighting harness on Tutu there on the right side, you can see that you have a stick there in the back. And what that does is the pulling power is a little bit lower. So it's a bit more, it's better for pulling heavy and for bigger dogs in particular, because then the only pressure point that they actually have is in the chest. However, some dogs don't really like to run in those types of harnesses because they are like, either they don't run consistently smooth, means like they are slacking sometimes and then pulling again and what have you, or they just don't like that something is dangling there in the back. Tutu has no problem with it, but a dog like Nag that I just mentioned, you know, in third row from the back basically, he doesn't like it. He doesn't really perform that well, so for him it's much better to use something else. There you see actually the braking system. So the brake that I'm standing on there, that's the main brake, and then the black thingy that you saw after that or before that, That's the breaking pad that I talked about. So depending on that, you have different styles. Yeah, there you see my male dogs peeing. Akpik, who is running in lead there, she's actually also in heat a little bit there. And Anyadok is quite interested. You see him sometimes when I'm stopping, like he's sniffing on her back part. And when one of the females is in heat, it tends to bother, in quotes, all the dogs a little bit, all the males a little bit, so they get cocky and shit, and the aggression level in general gets higher in the team. Like I said, those guys are Malamutes, and Malamutes are really pack oriented and have in general a little bit of a higher aggression rate compared to other dogs. And in particular, you can't compare them to pet dogs at all, really. Regardless, so back. The middle dogs there are tame dogs, that's what they're called, and then you have the lead dogs that obviously are responsible for the left and right and also keep the line stretched out. So they have to pull a little bit, not too heavy, but they are supposed to keep the line straight, the middle line stretched out. The middle line, by the way, is usually out of steel, so it doesn't break. Everything else should be in one way or another out of a material that can rip under, when something is tangled or whatever, or can be cut. When you have a huge tangle, or worst case, like you're standing on a cliff, or what have you. You can cut stuff. So you always have to have a knife and handy and whatnot. So for me, the neckline, that's the line that you see is closer to the neck there on the collar. That one is just 3mm PE rope, and then the main rope is like 6mm strong or something like that. The reason is when they go the wrong way, you have a stick in the way, or a tree in the way or whatever. If they get entangled in that, then that 3mm rope on the neck just breaks. Instead of actually putting the stress on the neck itself. Here you see it start to thawing out. Spring is there. Anyway, so you see, that's a little bit about that. But behind the lead dogs, like I said, are responsible for doing commands left and right, and the going command pretty much everybody knows, as well as the stopping command. So and those are, left is ha, G is right. Yeah, G is right, exactly. And then the stopping command is ho. And then they immediately stop. My team is pretty good at it because I'm training pretty heavily in the summer. Means like heavy loads, so they actually learn to pull properly. So they actually want to stop. So if you say ho, they immediately stop. And that is pretty important, not necessarily when you run like this, in terms of since you have a break there, but if I'm running, what you see in some of my older videos from when I was up in Svalbard, I'm mainly skiing next to the dogs, or next to the sled, or sitting straight on the sled. Then it is very important that the dogs actually stop on command, because you're not in charge in terms of braking, so you have to have a different system basically in place. So it's really important, and my dogs are pretty good at it. And when it comes to G and Ha, they actually, most of the dogs, even in the team, they actually know the command. So sometimes you can see Tika, for example, when she's running the back, when I'm saying Ha means to the left, she's already reacting, and the lead dogs are a little bit delayed in that. It's pretty funny sometimes to see that. As well as the other dogs. The only one who doesn't know the commands that well is Kinyak. She's quite young. She's 1.5, closing in on 2 in September. So she has plenty of time to learn, so that's no problem, really. But yeah, so lead dogs, pretty important. What they don't really do is pulling heavy, That's why it's actually pretty good if you have a team like that, to actually put the lead dogs once in a while, just switch them around, which in general is pretty good. So in my team, when you look at those six guys, Tutu and Tika in the back, they can run a lead as well. Kinyak, second row there. She's not so much. She's a little bit insecure running in lead, so she doesn't really like it. Nag, next, he's actually in swing position, by the way, or point position. That's the row behind the lead dogs. He can. I haven't run him in lead lately since he's goofing around quite a much. But his father, Ignik, he can run a lead. And the two guys that stay back, Galina and Nippy, they also can run a lead. Galina is a little bit up and down. She's not that good in commands, but she is happy and, want to go and whatnot, And then the two guys in the front, that also are pretty good in lead. What those two guys in the lead are lacking a little bit is just going straight forward. If they see a reindeer left or right, they tend to just want to go there. That's still some problems that I kind of have to iron out. The other guys, they just go straight forward, basically. That's what they're supposed to do. Nippy Todok was really good at that. I had a video once up where I went out with a wagon just with him. That's like, he was 1.5 years old back then. I was living on my friend's farm, and I had a cow pretty much standing straight on the road, and he just drove around, just navigated around it. So that's what they're supposed to do, really. Not all of them do, though, so it depends a little bit. Yeah, so it's, dog sledding is not really rocket science, but there is a lot of stuff involved, and I often say if you have never trained yourself, you don't really know what kind of impact you actually have on the dogs, or what the training has, what kind of training you have to do, or what kind of what the training actually what kind of impact it has on the dogs. So meaning, if you want a certain thing out of your dogs, like you want to do touring, or you want to race, or whatever, you have to train accordingly. In my case, I'm a little bit more in the touring side, so for me, going longer distance than 60 kilometers is not really something that I on a regular basis need to do, because what I need to do is like being out often, so the dog's actually used to just being out on a regular basis. I don't need to run 100 kilometers or something. It's good to train that once in a while. This season, unfortunately, it was cut a little short, in that I had some minor issues with some of the dogs, like just slight limbs or whatever, or the heat period that I actually had in that the dogs were in heat, females were in heat in January. Basically took me a little bit out of training, because the dogs are just super crazy. Then you can do short runs, but you can't really do long runs, because the chance that you have some problems with males, want to fight, or just going overboard because they're just crazy then, is quite high. So you want to keep it a little bit shorter, like 30, 40, 50 kilometer runs, but not exceeding that. So there's certain things that you just have to have a little bit in mind and learn, I mean, I'm doing that now for like 10, 12 years, something like that. So you live and you learn, like, kind of. So it's, and if you're doing training by yourself, like running or cycling or whatever you do, you kind of learn how to navigate your body, and you can see what kind of impact that actually could have. Not only you can see it on your body, but potentially translate that to your dog training. And you have never trained a day in your life, you have no clue, really, because you can't really emphasize, holy hell, emphasize on what kind of impact that actually has, because obviously dog bodies work differently, but there is similarities. Physicality is still embedded in all creatures, so you can still translate your experience to the dog's experience. Even though dogs are much better in adapting, they have done studies on long distance racing where they actually tested the blood, took blood samples on sled dogs, and whenever it's like on a 1,600 kilometer race, they actually, instead of like there was a threshold. I think it was around 300-400 kilometers. Until then, they kind of like got weaker and weaker in terms of performance, which would be the case for us as well. But after that, they had a metabolism shift and burned way more through or had way more energy supply via fat absorption, and get their energy out of fat really, rather than protein and carbs, and actually got improved on their performance throughout the whole race, which was still is still 1,200 kilometers to go, so they actually got better. For us, that would be the total opposite. We would get weaker and weaker by the day. So have that a little bit in mind in terms of like dog training and whatnot. But regardless of that, it is pretty important to have in mind, on how you train and what your goal set is. Like I said, a short distance race has very different demands on body, on your body, and on equipment or what have you, compared to a tour. Like if you're going out for 2-3 weeks or whatever, like I did this season or last year as well. Or if you actually want to go on a race, like a 300, 400, 500 kilometer race, then you have to train accordingly. And that also should include you, not just the dogs, That's what a lot of people always forget a little bit. And obviously then nutrition comes in place. My dogs, they eat both meat and also dry food. In the summertime, it's a little bit more dry food rather than meat, because it's a little bit more out of convenience because I have no fridge storage or what have you. So it's a little bit better than to rely on dry food. Last summer, I was solely feeding them on Arctic fish, Atlantic fish. Like usually just like sea ocean fish from the ocean. More or less freshly caught. It's like a transport comes in play as well. I'm living in Sweden, so the Norwegian fish takes a little bit to come here, but it was pretty good. All the leftovers mostly, but there is still a lot of flesh on it. Pretty good stuff. But now this year I will not do that. But the meat depends a little bit. I will still supplement a little bit, but not as much. And then in autumn time, when moose hunting season comes into play, then I get a lot of moose meat usually. All the leftovers, bones and everything, which is really good for the dogs. The only downside is you definitely have to deworm the dogs then afterwards, because there's a big chance that they get worms, which you should do anyway before the season starts, so it takes a little bit less toll on the dogs. So yeah, so after that, then it shifts a little bit more into more meat. It's mostly minced meat, like comes in 20 kilo blocks, and then just supplement with the dry food on top of it to have a little bit more energy input basically into the dogs, so they stay healthy and fresh. On tour, I'm just pretty much just use dry food, because I will fatten them up a little bit, like a week or two prior to the tour, and then we just use dry food because it is much easier and much lighter in what you get out of the energy level, basically what the dry food actually has. And then I quite often supplement with just vegetable oil to get a little bit more fat in. It would be good to use salmon oil, but salmon oil is bloody expensive. And the dogs did actually pretty well on the dry food. They always slim down a little bit, but that is also because they run 40-50 kilometers a day. So that is not just due to the fact that they only get dry food, but it's also they kind of like they call what we call dry out. Basically, it's the same like when you would all of a sudden like really increase your running, like running 20-30 kilometers a day or whatever. Your body will transform that way. So yeah, so we reached the lake here. This one is called Sturenchen. This one usually takes a long time before it actually freezes up, so it's still pretty solid. Now, of course not. I will stop here in a second, and then I'm gonna give the dogs a snack. On short ones like this, on 32-kilometer runs, I just give them like a little bit of dry food, so they have a little bit of stuff in the stomach that they can digest, but also like just to treat them a little bit. You can see they know exactly what's going on. And it's also what they do then, also like they snap a little bit of snow to get a bit more water in, and also to cool down a little bit. So I usually stop, check a little bit on if they're fine, if they're breathing too heavy, you can stop a little bit longer because it was quite a warm day. The temperatures during the night were like -4, but during the day it was already heating up like to 4 or 5 degrees. So that already has an impact since they're still in full coat, so it's good to check them. Yeah, so that sums it up a little bit. If you have some questions, just let me know, otherwise just enjoy the ride. Hopefully my talking didn't bother you too much, and have a good one, guys. Enjoy.